project that I'm doing with my P3 students. We are having we are in a program called Dream Starter, and in this program we are having a project, and we brainstorm the problem the world is facing, and we think that there are too much plastic that we are using now, and the plastic are polluting the ocean, and so I formed the student to think of how to reduce using plastic so that we can save the world and save the fish. So this poem, when I first read it, it reminds me of something I can do with my P3 student. And next one, we have Elbert.
Thank you, Polly. Okay, I'm going to read 5 poems. The first one is, it's called Our Name is Legion. Legion refers to the Roman army. They have a group of soldiers, very famous in, I don't know what century was that, during the Roman rule. And you also, if you have a religious background, you may have also encountered this name in the Bible. Legion refers to a group of demons, actually, haunting people, making them sick. So, it's amazing that, when I started to write, you think about the epidemic, the virus, humanity versus virus. It's amazing that whatever I thought about, Birgit, in her poetry, she thought about similar things as well. The first time I learned the term virus was from a computer course that I took many years back. And I've forgotten whatever I've learned in that course. But I remember we had a conversation with the professor, and we were talking about, okay, computers, are they going to be more intelligent than humans, And he said, no, the computer is in fact very stupid. So he said, oh, it's so fast, it can perform, hundreds and thousands of calculations per minute, which normally would take a human, a year to finish, something like that. And these days we have more powerful computers as well. So I don't know how they're going to help us. But the conversation led to something else. It led to the question that whether more intelligent beings will come to dominate the world. Humans, very intelligent compared to perhaps monkeys, I don't know, other animals. So we are the most adaptive, right? Yeah. So then the professor said something. The only thing that I could remember from that course is he said, no, the virus is the most adaptive. All right. Intelligence doesn't mean adaptation. Okay, it's just that we can do math and think of abstract things. We build rockets these days, computers. But whether we are adaptive is another issue. So this poem that I'm going to read, it's about the virus. It's written in the form of a monologue. The virus talking to humans. Yeah. So we have nothing against you, like you have something against us. You are made up of cells. We break down cells. We happen to. We do not intend. We cannot. You spew microplastics. You and your things, they attack Earth, life in all forms. Not that you intend to, but you happen to. We are a pure collective. No hierarchy, not social, never personal. We are equal. You try to be. We have always been. Surely we will infect you. You were infected the day you were born with viruses in your head. You prey on your own kind. Then you write stories on gender, race, humankind. You divide, we don't. We are a collective. We are not free. You seem to be. You plan, you act. You choose your leaders, you organize. You populate and decimate. Then you hide stories. but you forget your wars. The last one, 80 million perished. It's a number. We are also a number. To you, we bow. You evolve, and therefore you dream. You dream of gods, queens, masters, slaves. We have no god, no queen, no master, no slave. We don't vote. We are a collective. We act. We do not dream, so we do not evolve. We mutate. Before Homo sapiens was, we are. Before your yin and yang, neither male nor female. We are before you, outside you, above you, below you. You are in us, we are in you. You can dream of a world without us. We can live in a world without you. Okay, so this is the first poem. So the next one is all about nature and animals and things. So the next one is called On a Hiking Trail. I do a bit of hiking, and I enjoy it sometimes, solitary walks, not very long walks. Hong Kong is a very nice place, actually. You can find very nice paths and very quiet with the bush and beautiful trees. And of course, during the pandemic, a lot of people from the city would, go to the new territories, the islands, and they do their hiking. It's a nice thing, a nice, good, exercise, I think. And then you walk, and then you observe people. I don't know whether it's a good thing to do. And you hear, you can't help hearing people talk as well. So this poem is about my encounter with different people on the trails. So children, you see children walking, and they would be picking up branches, digging things, picking leaves, and if they're flowers, they will ask their mothers what they are. So I think for a human child, nature is a big playground for them. The branches and the rocks they pick up will be their toys. Nature, toys for children. And then sometimes you see lovers as well, a couple of young people, they would be hiking, and they find a lot of privacy and solitude that is important for some kind of intimate exchange, I believe, that you don't find in the cities. And for them, nature is a source of, this protection from being observed by others. But I was there, And then there are others. There's a lot of people seem to bring the city with them when they go hiking, and then they will talk about, oh, this is a nice flat. How much do you think it is? And oh, it's so close to the trees. It's very good. It's a very beautiful sight. They would say things like that. I think for these people, nature is a kind of backdrop for their main drama in life, which is to purchase a nice flat. So nature for them is a backdrop. There are others as well. There are people who are genuinely interested in nature, I would say. Some people are, they are very knowledgeable about plants. They say, oh, I'm not very good at this at all. This is, the scientific name, that's the life cycle of certain plants, and then it's good for medicine, and oh, that kind of wood, it's very strong, it's good for making furniture, some would say. So for these people, maybe nature is kind of resource for them, and we have people who are environmentally active as well. So a lot of young people are into environmental movements, and for them, it's important to protect nature, whatever that is in nature, because we need diversity. So it's a human project, all right, of a kind. And for the village locals, and there are some big trees. Hong Kong, it's very nice. It preserves a lot of nature in a certain way. So there's certain trees that are very big, and I imagine, I don't know how old they are. So they've been there for 50, 100 years. And then they have little stones there, and then they would say, this is a tree god, you pray to it, and something happens. So I think for most of us anyway, nature is seen from human terms, how it's going to serve human society. Yeah. It could be the wood, it could be medicine, it could be the shade, fresh air, That's okay, I think. But I want to give you two more examples of how we deal with nature. Something that may strike you as well. It struck me that there are a lot of nice cartoons, made by big movie companies like Walt Disney. And I don't know whether you've heard of Bambi, the deer, yeah, the Lion King, yeah, and so Bambi, beautiful deer, and then you watch the cartoon, it's courageous, it grows, so on, and the kids enjoy it, watching Bambi. Okay, it's time for lunch. What are you gonna do? Can we have a field steak? Now, it's like they're ordering Bambi's cousin for lunch. Now, I feel there is a lot of, this sort of observation unsettles me, what's nature to us? It's just something to feed into whatever imagination we have, whatever fantasies we have, the human world, we get it from nature. There are a lot of examples in many cultures, I think in certain parts in India, certain people, they worship the cobra, it's a deity for them, you can't touch them, or you stay away, you respect them, really. And here in Hong Kong, they would just, you see a cobra, you kill it, and then in the winter time, it's good for making a soup, if you know how to cook it. So, what is nature to us? It's always, for me, what I've seen is it's always something to feed into human needs, it's a resource, and it's really up to our fantasy to say what nature is. But I think nature should have a say. Trees don't talk, of course. Animals, well, you can't say that they don't communicate to us. We really pay attention to higher animals, higher on the evolutionary ladder. I think they do communicate. I think we are learning more about, the good thing is I think we're learning more about them these days. Regarding this, I think we have to, it's important that we learn to see nature not in terms of what we imagine it is and what we can get from it. It's important to see nature as some kind of absolute other. The otherness of nature is important, but we don't do it in the civilizations that we live in today. But I have to mention a book that I found interesting. There's a lot of research these days in psychology to do with the behavior of plants. It's the book called Thus Spoke the Plant by Monica Gagliano. I think she's a professor at a Western Australia University. I'm not sure of the name of the university. And we're studying plants. It seems that without the nervous system, they learn. They can be conditioned. All right. So it tells us something about certain parts of nature what we used to think are dead. Just they grow. Plants they grow. But it seems to be there are other aspects of nature that are still waiting for us to understand. And I think science, instead of just serving humans, I think maybe they should see nature as something that is in itself, of itself as well, instead of whatever we fantasize nature to be. So that's very important. So this poem is about my encounters with people, children and adults when they go hiking. So I want to talk about nature, trying to portray nature as it is, like two parallel worlds happening, human and then nature. So on a hiking trail, what is this plant? We want to know its name. Follicles and shades of green appearing and disappearing without names. The air is so fresh here. My phone is not working. Weak signals, perhaps. Leaves roam, rush, returning to an unspeakable void. It's getting dark, I'm hungry. I have a flashlight. You want a candy bar? Amidst trees, heartbeats of earth deities. It's a long walk, are we safe here? When is it gonna end? The descent of our silent birth, an opus to shiver's primal quiver. What's that sound? What sound? Never ask for the names of trees and plants again. A leaf fell, we are. Okay, so the next one, it's called COVID distance. Going back to the last couple of years, 2020, it was mainly COVID-19. Go back one more year, Hong Kong was upset by certain social movements, and there were protests and a lot of unhappy things that went on in the world. And they seem to come together for some reason. I don't understand the timing of these things. But I was thinking, maybe humans are faced with two major kinds of problems. One is human-based, ideologically oriented, the wars and the tribal conflicts. It could be to do with fighting for resources, but it could be something else as well. I think it's ideological divide between different political systems. It's a very wide distance, and it's hard to bridge. And then we have COVID-19, and these are physical problems. One kind of problem is human. Another kind of problem is, biologically, physically based, and they are solvable problems. They can be solved. And for COVID, it could be very simple. Keep a distance, a few meters. The physical constraints would not allow, droplets to travel so far. We can learn from this. So this poem is about the two major kinds of problems that we face and how different they are and how they are plaguing humanity. She waves the flag of semantics of color, held her distance, the distance between east and west, left and right, infinite distance, unbridgeable distance, between good and evil, light and darkness, damned distance. Now she wears a mask, keeps COVID distance, 2 meters, a safe distance, dying for a hug distance, people distance, real distance. It glides into the night. So this is the poem. It's got a strange name. It refers to something. It glides into the night. In the night, nobody knows what's going on there. So the reason I wrote this poem is related. I wrote it a while ago, actually. Hong Kong has been plagued by COVID-19 is the current epidemic, but I think about 8 years back or 10 years we had SARS, right? And then a few years back we had H2N2, chicken flu, yeah? And I noticed that, okay, the doctors, the nurses, the medical profession, they're always in the front line, very heroic people and deserves respect from the society. But there's another group of people who are less noticed, but they are very important. Usually they have these what we call manual jobs. Cleaners. Hong Kong is a very small city, but with lots of people in it. The cleaning is very important. But I think we, for some reason, this city has ignored certain people who have really contributed. You can imagine them stop cleaning for 1 week, and the society will collapse. Okay? The CEOs, the chief executive, they stay away from. They take 1 month's holiday. Nothing big will change. But for the cleaners, they disappear for a week, and that's it. That's it for Hong Kong. So this poem is dedicated to those people who work for us, very important positions, and maybe a bit under compensated, underprotected. So it glides into the night. It glides into the night with one eye open, one wing, one arm. Then it spirals down through thick air on rooftops of houses below to the gardens, and climbs up again as quickly as the whirlwind wind to catch the cool breeze of an upcurrent that takes it to the dark heavens. But it remembers the sweet osmanthus scent, the way it was carried in the night mist as it brushed against his body, gale-force wind that lifted each feather of his wing, the face of an infant. Then it calls itself Ina. For the first time, Ina saw her legs, gently touching the ground. At a tap on her shoulders, she opens the other eye, her one wing gone. Now she belongs, works with her hands, raises a family. She's not afraid to die.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, okay.
So the name Ina is actually a person.
Yeah, it's like this person acquiring an identity. You know, it's like a no one, but very, it's just like someone, cleaner. So it's an imaginary name for an imaginary person. So she found her identity by relating to her family. So it's kind of weird moment for me too.
Because the name, I don't know, I Googled the name.
It's not based on reality, this one. It's just based on my imagination. Okay, I'll read the last one. So this one is like another kind of fantasy, after apocalypse, or the apocalypse, the end of COVID, world problems, we're so used to wearing masks, we identify people by our faces usually, facial recognition, but maybe our identity is, with us in different ways. Maybe it's in the genes, our identity could be found in the whole person. So this is slow dance after apocalypse. He held her by the waist, that body warmth, it spoke, unmistakable. Now without her mask. You want to wear your mask? Just want to make sure you are you. At the central piers, the sun was warm. Slow music, a familiar song, it's blowing in the wind. She removed her mask. There were faces. They have hands and fingers. They do not have names. They are. What's your name? Have we met? He put back his mask on, face gone. It's been a while. Yeah, so that will be the end.
We are the audience.
Judge, jury, execution.
Yeah, and the last poet will be Jason. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Polly, for organising. Thanks so much for the great poems, Elbert and Birgit. It's interesting, I think, the way in which you guys, you turn to nature quite directly and concretely when you're talking about how you're dealing with the issues of COVID. And I think it's interesting that for many of us, when we're locked up in our homes, we have this sudden appreciation, right, for sublime nature. And I think, like many other people, I've tried to go on more hiking trails, and I've begun to feel like Hong Kong is not just a pinpoint of different points on an MTR station. The city is often a place where if you want to get from A to B, you often have to go through C, D, E. So I think I've become more aware of the actual Euclidean geometry of Hong Kong. It's like, how do I get to there? Instead of going via Choi Hong MTR, I can just walk through this particular neighborhood. One of the things that I tried to do when Polly asked us to think of a sequence of poems based on the idea of humanity versus virus is to think about how we're dealing with these change of circumstances, both at a kind of immediate level, how we're trying to deal with the restrictions that we are faced with, but also the kind of the bigger, wider issues that both Elbert and Birgit have talked about. This idea of how we are coming to terms with climate change, which is very much human-induced. How the virus, in the minds of some of us, is a kind of warning for the efficacy of nature and what it can do to us. And that led me to kind of compile a number of poems that talk about the hopes and fears that we have as collective members of the human race. But also to kind of delve into some of the more, the superstitious psychical elements that we have when we deal with poetry and images. So this won't make sense to any of you guys now, but hopefully after I've read my poems, it might kind of all click. The first poem that I'll read then is, I think, a fairly straightforward one. We've all probably seen images of people in the hospital really struggling to come to terms with COVID. People on ventilators, people really struggling against death. So I wanted to open with a poem that talks about this in terms of how we can try to give hope to those who are stuck in a position like this. So this poem is called, quite simply, Paper Cranes. Already you are circling the edges of your sleep, wrestling with those restless, endless shapes from your dreams, before rising to ungirdle your neck and flap towards the iron shutters as though you might be set free. Outside, the birds are clamoring for you, a flightless boy. But since you cannot join them or be set loose from this dour cage, since you cannot tread that still marble lake or pace the corridor of migration with them, do not fret or worry. For I will make you paper cranes, lines of cranes dangling in miniature from every nook and eyrie of this ward. 1,000 cranes serenely poised around you and folded and pressed sensitively, so that when you part the curtains with a great swoosh of your wings to contemplate your freedom, they too will flutter towards each open window. They too will accompany you in all your bitter memorials, strutting back and forth with agile movement. And it will not count for nothing to think something so beautiful could be made from paper strips, beads and string. For as you rise from your restless bed to speak of their angled elegance and immortality, the rigid wires will uncoil themselves as they hold you in shimmering beaks, ready to lift your cumbersome shape upwards above yourself into a weightless sky. So this poem is dealing with a concept that's quite popular in Japanese culture, the idea of designing paper cranes, right, to kind of wish people well. So I wanted to take that idea and push it onto a metaphor that sees the patient as like a bird trying to escape. The next three poems that I've got are very different from this. What they are trying to do is they're trying to deal with certain kinds of superstitions that we get. And I borrowed the kind of the inspiration from these from tarot card decks. Do you guys know tarot cards? So they're very, very, you often see these at fortune tellers, right? They get the cards, they lay them out, and they say, oh, this is a very good card for you because, and then they do a very deep symbolic reading. So I wanted to kind of offer my own internal working of these symbols and how I might relate them to kind of 21st century period of crisis. These are fairly negative, so I hope you forgive me for this. The first one is called, quite simply, death. 13. Unlucky for some, but for me, the perfect prime evil number. Who am I, you say? That mystery without a name, bringer of the grey dawn, he who breathes frost on rose petals, Reaper G. I'm your ultimate chess player. I trample kings and bishops as I would any pawn, driving pestilence and war before me. leaving sorrow and bewilderment to fight it out in my wake. Well, that's what they'll tell you. Coming in on my pale charger and ruining everyone's day. Surprise! All that reaving and raising, etc., etc. But now I've discarded my rusty plate mail and traded my cart horse for a motor. No lightning raids are coming on unawares. I've filled up my quota, turned over a new leaf, found a new vocation in line with this new generation. Out with the clunky hourglass, in with this Rolex stunner. No, I've turned respectable with my retro trilby and wide-rimmed spectacles. No longer Sir, it's Inspector Death now. I come knocking on doors, bringing my services with a smile. Now I make them cough up or choke, bleed them dry, metaphorically of course. Mine is a slow grinding down of willpower, all part of the institutional setup. You might think you're safe up there in your heights, your lonely mansion, but there's no getting away from me. I leave my calling card on every doorstep. Death and taxes, you say? Why, don't mind if I do. So this particular poem is making use of many of the images that you see on that particular tarot card. And it's very much about some of the kind of the bureaucracy of everyday life that can lead to the kind of the breakdown of our humanity. This next poem is very different. It's about how we imagine a life on earth without us. And I think it touches upon some of what Elbert and Birgit were saying about how nature will carry on without us. We are ultimately quite helpless in the face of it. So this one is called The Moon. Out there in the wondrous desolation, the moon is now in its ascendancy, staring at the darkness all around and enjoying the earth's convalescence. Just another quiet nocturnal scene with no discernible human presence. The trees balk at their own immensity. The brooks run on by, unsullied, sober. Perhaps, encouraged by this stillness, the animals gather upon the heath, hearing the tide's music, the rushing wind cajoling back the encroaching shoreline. Amidst the ruins of towers and towns, a dog chances upon its ancient kin, the wolf, and reunited now they both howl their bestial longing, primed for the hunt. Eager to break out of their crustacean minds, the crayfish scuttle out of themselves, unimpeded, already evolving, projecting a path straight through the mountains. As though seeing for the first time their strength, the beasts begin to bask in their dominion, while that wan and aquiline face stares down, alone, awaiting rediscovery. So the poem is quite abstract. It deals with this idea of what might happen when humans have been obliterated. And it finishes with the idea of the moon staring down. We often give the moon a human face, and I don't actually know why we do that. I think it's a kind of arrogance on our part when we think that the moon is going to reflect us. But in this case, the moon is alone because we are gone. The poem that follows that is really about how, with the virus, we're feeling immortal again. And I think that's good. I think with mortality comes, as you said, Birgit, humility. And I think that humility hopefully will lead to more progressive action when it comes to things like economic inequality or trying to deal with some of the ecological problems that we're now facing. It's called simply The World. The final hand twitches as it turns over. No bright, iridescent orb, but Mother Earth herself, sliding between constellations, and eyeing the emptiness beyond us. She watches as we strip her naked, rolling down her hills and raising concrete mounds on goose-pimpled flesh, lighting up her bruised and pockmarked body. She senses that something is off balance. No calf now rears from its mother's udder. No eagle storms perilously down from skies. No lion roars from dense undergrowth. Now, only man's face presides outwards, a gleam of pride and sweat on his brow. Looking harder at the card, we see her still, ready to embrace her errant children, channeling her desires onto ours, expecting that through visions and omens, through all these trials and tribulations, we have come back to her at last. What we make of her gullibility, of one who continues to give, heedless that we have taken all and returned nothing, lowered ourselves under her green tresses, and sundered what little is left behind. Perhaps, knowing that our circle must culminate somewhere, she waits, seeing in the world's ending its beginning. So this is the idea that, throughout the evolution of the Earth, there's been cycles where we've had life, and then we've had immense changes in the kind of the atmosphere of the Earth, and we've had new life forms. So this is my way of trying to imagine us as humans kind of getting our just desserts in a way. And it's another way of paying tribute to nature, which sustains us and replenishes us. And the fact that we have grown ignorant of what we are doing to that environment. The last poem that I'll finish on is probably the only poem that I have actually written amongst these five in the past couple of months. And it's a poem that I wrote when I was thinking very much about what contributions I could make to the community, and how I can help my friends, my family, and my students try to deal with a lot of the problems that we've had in the city. So this goes beyond COVID. This kind of encapsulates the general sense of fear and despair in the city. And one of the things that I was trying to think of when it came down to the title of this panel, Humanity versus Virus, is how humanity at its best can encompass a sense of hope, and how when it comes to us dealing with the virus, we are often surrounded by so much fear. It is the fear itself that seems to be dealing as much damage as the virus. So I wanted to end on a sense of hope, just to make me feel good about myself and the process of writing poetry. So this poem is called A Hong Kong State of Mind. It's the presumption of guilt that drives us back into ourselves, into our very core, that hushes us back, line by line, through every unlearned word or slogan. It's the gaze that follows us home along corridors of regret, where every wall remains an unfinished canvas, or the vacant stare that leaves each screen blank and each call or plea unanswered. It's the mask that stifles however it is worn and strangles every cry into a cry of despair. It's the touch that spells an act of longing. It's the longing that comes after a betrayal. But every act is still an act of living, a new beginning that grasps beyond itself. From each lonely child that rocks back and forth at night, cradling the promise of a word or declaration, to the artist forming murals in the sky of her head, or the worker already ticking off tomorrow's labor. It's to preserve in every utterance a sign that this day will be followed by another day, that the air is still free, and the morning that greets and beckons you into song is still yours. And no presumption of anything beyond this act of living can stifle your will to live. And no state of the mind can ever drown that voice that calls from within.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Birgit and Elbert, for sharing their poems with us. When I read their poems, I find they're very diverse. Birgit talked about animals, and when I read Elbert's poem, it's more of from a human perspective of seeing the nature. And I read Jason's poem. The space is more big, and it talked about the moon, the space outside of not just about the city, but a bigger picture from Jason's poem. So it's really very wonderful to read their poems. And I would like to share a poster with you. And this poster, I found it in my boyfriend's room. And so here you can see the first word is sleep, wake, write, exercise, practice, and eat. So after a good night's sleep, then we awake, and then we started to write, and then we do exercise, and then we practice. We practice writing, we practice singing, we practice dancing. And then we have to eat. We have to eat fresh, good food. And I think this is exactly what we have to do now to maintain a good health, to maintain a good mental health. So, and the thing is, and another thing I like about this poster is it's actually a poem. You can see after the word eat, there's a full stop. So it's actually a sentence with an image, and then with the punctuation. So it's actually a poem. So my friend is writing a poem without realizing it's a poem. And last but not least, thank you for listening. Stay home, wash your hands, and keep social distancing.
And write poetry.
So thank you for the tours, and thank you for watching us live here.
And thank you, Polly.
Yeah, thank you, Polly. Thank you, Polly.